Hello, Dorian.
Hey, Jesper, how are you doing?
I'm very good. How are you? Thank you.
Fine.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be joining you today and talk about this topic. I've done a couple of these kind of like workshops, but neither in English, so it's gonna be a first time. So we'll see.
You have good English pronunciation, so it's not gonna be a problem.
Okay, great.
I think I'm gonna start off if you could tell us a little about yourself and your background. Um, I think that would be great introduction for our audience.
Yeah, of course. So I'm 25, so I don't have a very long background because I'm kind of like still young. But I started in music by launching my own music blog 6 years ago, which is called Indeflagration, which is too long. So I know that the next time I was going to launch something, it was going to be shorter. But it's a kind of indie music blog where I started talking about music that I liked, and I didn't know anything about music except that I was listening to it, and it kind of got me into understanding how things work around the artist, who were the people working with them, and get to know how it could work in this industry. And then a little bit more than 2 years ago, I went to California where I met three guys who became my co-founders of Groover, which is actually a web platform that we launched because of the experiences that we have had on our sides. So Romain and Jonas were musicians. They had launched some music, tried to promote it, and it had been problematic for them. And I had my experience with Indeflagration as a music blogger. And I knew that I was receiving too many emails every day, around 100 requests per day, and I couldn't listen to any of it because I didn't have time at all. So we started working on a platform that could help musicians connect with what we call music influencers, but is more like music tastemakers. And it would be music blogs, music playlisters, also radio stations a lot. And the idea was really to make again this connection. And Groover is a web platform on which artists can choose who they want to contact, the music bloggers, the music influencers, the radio stations, and they send their song. They are micro payments, so they pay €2 by person they select. But the very important part is that we guarantee the artist that the track is going to be listened to, and that they're going to get some feedback on their music at least, and maybe more, which is the idea. And so we started with this basic idea. We kind of like went along with it, and it didn't change much, but the platform evolved a lot to be able to welcome more and more musicians. And now we've had more than 15,000 musicians and artist representatives who use the platform to send their music. And on the other side, we have around 500 music influencers, tastemakers who are currently active on the platform and receiving music submissions. And this idea was really to help artists get their music heard by making, again, this connection between the artist and the people who could help them develop their career.
Yeah, and speaking of Groover, I mean, I remember when I met you the first time and you told me about this, and I was like, this is so brilliant, because it seems that there's such a huge potential in being the infrastructure between creatives, whether that's labels or artists or whatever, and then the influencers, as you call them, in the receiving end, and like really building a funnel or this infrastructure where people can connect with each other. And then I understand that you also do some sort of curation. So if someone sends like a super shit song, it's not necessarily gonna go to everyone.
So it's not exactly that. So we don't have curation at the beginning of the funnel. So every artist, if they have like a YouTube or SoundCloud link, they can use the platform. But the thing is, since they have to pay €2 by contact, there's kind of like a natural filter, because when an
Yeah.
artist
Okay.
is not ready to promote their music, they usually are not ready to pay to have it promoted. So there's this natural filter, and then there's the second filter, which is it's €2 by contact. So actually, they are responsible in which persons they're going to contact, and they very careful in which they want to contact, because they want to have the best, maximize their results out of it. The creation comes a bit afterwards. It's that some of the projects that are sent on the platform are DIY artists and indie artists, or artists that are not known at all, but they have really good music and they have a lot of success with the influencers and the tastemakers on the platform. But they are still like kind of alone and not known by the audience. And the idea in this creation is just to say, how can we bring the ones that have the best results on the platform, that are really, that have a high potential, further? And we're trying to work on that side right now as a second step in the Groover business, on how we could bring some of the artists that have the most potential but are still much needing support further.
Yeah. And in terms of Groover, and this approach to curation or distributing music to influencers, do you have a lot of competitors in this space? Because it for me, it doesn't seem like a lot of people do this.
So there are a lot of services and companies who try to help artists promote their music, like saying you're going to see a lot of ads if you're an artist about services who help you get, I don't know, 20,000 more streams, or get more paid radio airplay, or get more features in something on YouTube, get more views on YouTube. You also have some services that say you're going to pay me that much and I'm going to send you music to, I don't know, 20,000 contacts and stuff like that. And it's very appealing. But what is interesting is that most of these services, they don't have any guarantee. I think this is a very important part here. It's that you're going to pay, they're going to send you music probably, but maybe you're not going to get any return, and don't know anything about, is your music going to be listened to? Are you going to get some features? Are you going to get something out of it? And that's why I usually warn people of these services. Some of them are probably good, and you can get some results out of these ones. But if you don't have any guarantee, it's kind of the same as how promotion can be done today, where you pay a lot of money and you don't know what's going to happen if there's not like a technology behind. So that's why we had the reason why we started the Groover was not because we had a product. It was this idea of bringing guarantee that someone is going to listen to your music and at least write a feedback. And that's the reason of the business model of the €2 by contact. And we pay the influencer, I didn't tell that already, but €1 by feedback made, whatever their decision is. So they keep the editorial line, but they are incentivized to listen to your music and actually answer you. They don't have a lot of competitors there, but we have probably one platform that is nice and doing the same as what we do in the US, which is called Summit Hub. But the reason why we started Groover is because they were very much focused on this territory in the US.
Yeah. And Summit Hub is very focused on blogs, right?
Yeah, very focused on blogs. Also kind of like Spotify playlisters. They have kind of a lot of Spotify playlisters, and they're really focused on the US. And naturally, they got a bit of following in the UK as well, because the US, the UK are very much connected. But I know that they don't have like a local strategy at all. I know that they are not located in the US even. It's very digital. And the way we wanted to do things different was because we knew that, especially in France, people didn't know about Summit Hub, or they knew about it, but they didn't have a good experience because their music wasn't a good fit for the US bloggers that were on Summit Hub. So the idea was to have a country by country local strategy and be able to gather some bloggers and some tastemakers in France at first to build a community. And we started doing some events, some networking events, and build a real community there in France of music tastemakers, influencers that artists could contact and have a real impact like true people of the music industry there. And that's why now we're trying to expand it, but country by country, and not having like this global thing, because we know that it makes a difference on this side.
Cool. And Dorian, I know that obviously you're also you have a history in the music industry, and you're managing a band or some artists, if I'm not mistaken. Could you tell us a little about your experience with the French music industry? What separates that from for example, other European countries? I mean, usually there's always some uniqueness of each country and how the industry works there.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the important things that obviously you know about, and that made other services that come from the US and the UK complicated, and also the things that make the French music market complicated to understand, is that the language is very important here. Lots of French people, they don't speak English. In the music industry, like the people in charge are still people in the 50s. They have 50 years old or 60 years old, so they're still not very English fluent and stuff like that. And what is important is there's a very much developed tradition around like music in French. There are also a lot of like rules on the radio, like the radio have to broadcast at least 50% of songs sung in French.
Yeah, can I stop on that, because that was actually one of my questions. And so I guess that's obviously true. Then is that all radio stations in France, or is it only governmental radios or national terrestrial, or is it just a rule that applies to all French radio stations?
I don't want to say any like mistake on this. It applies for sure to all the commercial radios and all the of course public broadcasting radios. Yeah. And I know that some of them even like committed to do even more. For example, we have a Radio Neo on the platform. It's a very cool radio station for music discoveries. They actually take a lot of risk in like broadcasting some very small artists that they like, and they committed to have at least 60% of the music in French. For the local radios, I think it depends of their status and the category. Like for example, web radios and online radios, I know that they don't have the same need, but the other ones, I know that even then they're not forced to it. Lots of them are going to say, I'm going to broadcast only music in French. So there are lots of them that are like this, which is actually kind of a good thing, because it goes with a tradition in France of they call it the cultural exception, but it's the idea of having a lot of support for the French culture, because it's an asset in like the economy of France, because it's like tourism and stuff like that. And it's kind of a cool thing, especially in these times, or I don't know. But it's also complicated, because if you don't have music in French, it's going to be complicated for you to get on air. And especially on the big radio stations, if you're not like a very huge artist, if you're not known in the whole world, like I don't like a song by the Say So hit by Doja Cat today, it's going to get on the radio. But if you're like even the Strokes, they're maybe going to get only on the rock radios, but it's going to be complicated to find a spot on some of these radios. So in a way, it's complicated on this. But I know that on the other side, in France, there's still the same system as in other places, the kind of star system, which means that like the big radio stations, yes, they're going to broadcast a lot of music in French, but they're usually going to broadcast a very minimal amount of these artists that are like the most famous ones. Like, I don't know, Angèle. I don't know if you heard about Angèle or this kind of people who have like big hits, and it's still going to be like this kind of same strategy. But to go back to your first question, I think there's this thing of the language, which is really important, is that it's kind of the same in Italy. It's even worse. We're kind of developing right now the platform in Italy, and in Italy, they really don't speak English, most of them. So it's something that is complicated. You need to be culturally there. I think the second thing, apart from the language, is that there's a big taboo around money in France. Especially in culture. in the culture space, except for hip hop or rap artists who are more like easy to talk about money and stuff like that. The other kind of artists, they kind of like are in a way of saying, yes, music, it's not something which with money attached to it. It's something that shouldn't involve money. And there's a lot of this like idea, but it's still very much present, but won't be probably in 10 or 20 years, that as an artist, you make music, so you make art, and they don't see their music as a product. I don't know if you see what I mean in that. It's that they do music. Of course, it's an art. It's a piece of art. But if you make money out of it and live out of it, you should be able to conceive it also as a product that you are going to be able to sell and to market. And I think this is one of the strong things with France, is that lots of people, they don't understand that, or they don't want to. They don't want that, or they still don't understand that. It's changing. But it's something that we are a bit lagging behind a lot of like the UK or the US, or like more English-speaking countries that are more knowing of that.
So there's a little bit of a taboo in terms of making money with your art, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like artists would think that they would live, they would get some money from nowhere.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's like. And maybe it has something to do with the fact that it's another thing that is important in France, is that we have a lot of subventions, a lot of money that's coming from the government to support the artists and support the professional structures. And maybe they believe that their music, they should put some money in producing their music, but then their music should be selling itself. And yeah I don't know. It's one of the things that's fun about it. Yeah.
Interesting. So if you were, like, let's say an artist from perhaps a different country, what can you do in France besides changing your music to French? But I mean, what kind of things can you do there? I guess you probably have radio promoters the same way as in other countries. And or is like radio promoters a necessity to break in terms of radio in France?
I think so, because so it's one of the important things that I think it's going to be complicated if you don't have a buzz in a country, or even if you have a buzz in one specific country, to get on the big radio stations. So you need to kind of build your way on radio stations in France, and you need to start with kind of the bottom, which are like the local and regional radios, and especially the local ones, kind of community radios and stuff like that. And to be able to contact them and seduce them, you need to know them a bit and know what kind of music they want to put on their radio. You can still like send big newsletters. I've tried it myself. And usually you get just a few answers, and it doesn't work really nice. So if you don't, either you try to understand how they work and how you can get in touch with them, or you listen to what they get on radio. But usually, since there are all these local radios in like remote areas of France, they won't be able to even to speak English or just be interested in your music, because they're going to be looking, if they're going to get some discoveries on air, they are usually gonna put some music in French, because there are still much more music in English than in French. So they are gonna favor music in French, because they are struggling to have like the 50% need of like music in French. So radio promoters is important, but it's not very well structured in France. There are some services. There are some that I heard of, but I've never used some. There are like a lot of PR officers who do blogs, magazines, but also do radio stations. This one can work. If you can work with them, it can be interesting. But I think one of the ways of starting off is maybe trying to gather some email addresses and try to contact them through their contact forms. It can be like a small work, but try to get a touch of it if you have a small budget. And if you have a big budget, there are some radio promoters, but specialized on it. But working with foreign artists, I don't know a lot about it. And actually, I talked with people in Quebec, so they speak French, and even then they don't understand at all how to contact the radios in France.
Yeah, because that was also a part of my questions would be like how closely related are other French-speaking countries, whether that's Canada or French New Guinea or
Belgium,
yeah, Belgium or part of Switzerland, or like how closely related do you think that other French-speaking territories or countries are?
I'd say that they're not. I think each country has its own ecosystem of media and radios, media outlets and radios. So there's not like a direct contact, but I think it's still it's of course easier for someone in France to, for example, contact radios from the French part of Belgium, for example. They're going to be listening to what happens in France. And especially, I think France is attractive for Quebec and Belgium. So if you listen to community radios in Quebec, they're very defensive of the music of Quebec, but they're also going to be eager to listen to like the new discoveries and new cool things that's happening in France, maybe more than in other countries. So they're still like this, there's something, but every ecosystem has its own specificities. For example, for Quebec, they have much more like big community radios attached to universities, to colleges, like you have in the US. We don't have that at all in France.
I think so you don't have college radios in that sense.
We have, but it's very different because it goes with the history of France, where we don't have big universities, we have small universities. So usually they don't have a community radio attached. They usually have it's called the Radio Campus, Radio Campus. You have probably seen that. And the Radio Campus, usually they are not attached to one university. They're usually attached more to the city. And there are some students from all around that contribute to the radio. And usually there are like some people who are much older that work in these radios that are not at all at college. So it's kind of like community radios, but it's not especially college. It's just in the name. And and I think it's interesting to understand the differences between the radio stations in France. I'd be interested to know if it's kind of the same in other countries, because I don't really know, but I kind of learned that recently. So you have kind of like 20 big radio stations, national radio stations that are broadcast kind of everywhere. Some of them are public from the Radio France, like the public broadcasting. Some of them are private, like NRJ, Virgin Radio. We have Fun Radio, these kind of like big radio stations. For these ones, it's almost impossible to contact them directly. And even when you have a PR agent, it's complicated. Usually the only way to get on this radio is to be signed on a major record label. You can get maybe a broadcast on these radios maybe once, if you're lucky and you know one of the assistant, the person working with someone there, or you have someone that is really much involved in the sector that's working with you, but it's very complicated. Then there's a second category of radio stations, which are more the big regional ones that are commercial radios. So you have, for example, in Brittany, you have Alouette FM and some other ones. And almost all these radios are gathered in kind of like a network that is called Les Indés Radios, which is the indie radios, which is kind of like a big ad network. So they're kind of like bundling all the radios in order to sell some ads, some ad spaces on there. And actually, it has become a very big ad network that is as big as the ones that we have for TV channels. And these radios are also really complicated to contact. Most of them have deleted their email addresses on their website. They have like kind of a form that you can use. And most of them, they work with a company called Yacast, that you know about.
Yeah, PMAT, Yacast.
Yes, Yacast. And you can use this service. It's kind of I'm not sure everybody can subscribe to this service because I didn't find the sign up place on this, but usually they make artists and especially record labels, big indie record labels and big record labels pay a very expensive subscription to have access to their platform, and then you can pay another amount by release, so that your track is sent to all these radio stations. This kind of
Dorian, give me a second.
No worries. Hey everyone. So Jesper is coming back. It's the joy of the lockdown.
It's just 3 kids running around playing hide and seek inside the house. So.
Yeah, no, but it's so I was in like the kind of different kind of radios that you have. So there's these big national radios. They are like the big regional ones that are linked with music. And
hang on, I have to close the door.
So these big regional radios that are working with Yakas, and you have to pay a lot of money to send your music to these radios, and they can cancel your track. They can download it. You actually can track a kind of this, but you don't know what's gonna happen. And usually, if you're like an indie artist and you're not with a big record label, you're not going to get a lot out of it, and sometimes nothing out of it, and you've spent a lot of money. But sometimes it can be great. And actually, these radios are bringing a lot of like publishing money. SACEM is looking a lot at these radios and the big radios. And then you get to the third category, which are more like the smaller one in local regional ones that are usually not commercial ones. So they're more like they're not for profit. And these ones, they are a lot. They're like between, I don't know, 1,000 and maybe, more than 1,000, I think, that are active. And these ones, they are separated in 2 categories. The first one is there are 3 big networks. So Radio Campus that I told you about. There's one called Ferrarock, which is more into like rock and indie stuff. And they have a network, and they also Réseau Quota network. And these 3 networks are important because you can have the contact of the people that program there on the website of this network, Ferrarock, Quota, and stuff. And you can contact them, and they are important because they are the ones who are used in the panel by SACEM for the royalties, for the royalty split. So they're interesting for that, because if you get on these kind of radios, you can get some royalties out of it. And there are all the other ones who are very kind of amateur but cool and listen in some places. And these ones, the only way of doing it is like find the contact, the email address, and kind of contact them. You're not going to get a lot of coverage out of it, but if you have time, you can definitely like gather these email addresses and try to get your music out of it on these kind of radios.
But I guess in reality, it is about. I mean, I take this from our first warm talk with Rachel Strasberger, who said that always remember to do very targeted promotion to, you know, perhaps few radio stations instead of doing like a mass spam, you know, and trying to hit everything, because then it will not be personalized, and nobody wants to respond to that. I mean, we all know that if we receive an email and we sense that it's just like putting your name into a random email, and you just delete it. So I think that's obviously important to note, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the strategies with this, you can definitely go and try to gather. One night I was like, I couldn't sleep, and I just spent 3 hours going on like like websites online and all the radio websites that I could find of the local radios, and gather all the email addresses and put them in like a spreadsheet. And you can spend some time doing that. And one of the strategy that I would recommend that you know of course, is you can start by sending a newsletter, like a nice newsletter to a lot of them. And you see that actually a lot of them open it. And actually, if you put a link to your track, and if you're targeting radios, I would recommend to put directly a button so that they can download the track if they want to directly. So some of them do it. and then you see who's going to click to listen to your track. If you have a tracking system within the newsletter thing, if you use MailChimp, if you use SendGrid or stuff like that. And if you don't have huge amounts of time, I would recommend to either if you're already in France, you can try to target the ones that are around you. If you have a connection to a specific region, you can contact one by one all these specific radios. But another thing that you could do is just to send this newsletter, see who clicked on the link and actually listen to it or download it. And then send a follow-up email one by one saying, hey, I thought that this song could be great for your radio, because actually they clicked on the link with the newsletter. It doesn't mean forcibly that your song is going to be broadcast, but it meant that your music was a fit for their editorial line, because they wouldn't have clicked on it to listen to it.
Or they were curious. Maybe you had a good tech headline or something.
Yeah. If you have it's important. Definitely.
That's cool. And so, in terms of this getting your music to radio stations, something that we have learned, at least from the warm users, is that certain users, they have found it relevant to actually monitor a similar song than to your own, that are, perhaps a bigger song. And so then you actually could quickly get like a short list of what radio stations in a certain country that would make sense to target. Because again, if you're not local, then it could be even difficult to determine what is a large radio station and what is maybe a small niche one, for example.
I agree. I think it's a great technique, because the idea is to say there are so many radio stations, even in France. If we focus on France, there are like 1,200. So you're specific email to each of them. But if you use Warm, and I've not used it that way, but I intend to do it in the future, and you have like one artist that what is a success in your niche. For example, you do psych rock, or you do like a kind of a Tame Impala style. And you want to see where Tame Impala is played you should like definitely try to do this. Maybe I would say Tame Impala is not a good example. I would suggest you not to take a too big artist, but maybe take an artist that has one thing you can do is go on Spotify, get on your profile, go into the similar artist tab, see the similar artists that you have around you. Usually you're going to find some that you definitely identify. Then find one who's maybe around, I don't know, between 200,000 and maybe 1 million max streams on a song. Then you can try like to change one of your Warm subscription to one of his song and see if he's played in the country you're targeting and on which radio stations. And it's probably then that you can definitely contact them, saying, I saw that you played this guy. I do kind of music that is in kind of the same area. Would you be interested in like sharing my music? I think it's a really good strategy, and everything is around how do you narrow the number of contacts that you have to make that are relevant, because you're not going to contact one by one 1,200 people. It's too much. So even you don't have time for this, even if especially if you're alone. So if you use Warm for this to have a specific targeting, or if you do like this newsletter to everybody, but then you spend time of each of the people who actually clicked on your link to do a follow-up thing, it really works really well. I've done it for a couple artists, and they have like, I don't know, 20, 25 clicks from nice radio stations. When I do a follow-up, and usually there's around 40 to 50% conversion by the follow-up email saying, yes, I listened to it, it's nice, I'm going to program it, because they like to be contacted directly. And one of the things that I didn't say that is interesting for France, if you're releasing an album and you have a lot of physical copies and you're able to send them, a lot of the local radios, they really like it. And sometimes, especially the ones in the network like Ferrarock or Ferrarock or a Quota network, or even the Campus network, if you send your album with a specific note or something,
they feel special.
They're gonna put the whole album in broadcast. I've got an artist. He's still been playing on one of these radio stations for 6 months, and he's playing like 3, 4, or 5 times a day with 7 different songs. So Yeah.
I mean, maybe that speaks to, you know, being even more, you know, personal in this sense, and maybe writing it in French.
Try. You can definitely try to write in English. I wouldn't advise to use Google Translate to
No,
like. No, I would advise do it in English.
that is worse.
No, it's worse. It's worse because even if it's like okay, even if the translation is okay, it's not natural. Maybe some people will appreciate the effort, but probably you can do. It speaks more if you're able to do something very simple in English, and maybe add something about this radio station. I don't know if you listen a track from somebody, if you like the editorial line, something that doesn't sound fake. It's probably better to do it in English that way. Yeah.
I'm also thinking like it's probably about, you know, separating you from the mass, right? So I mean, I'm just thinking outside the box, but if certain radio stations really appreciate like a physical album or CD or whatever, and you don't have that, you know, perhaps you could send them like merchandise or other stuff that where it's like where they're like, oh, this guy, he really, you know, spent time on this, and like. I mean, it sounds like it's like it makes sense to do some efforts in terms of personalizing it.
Exactly. And also, one of the important things that I would mention is probably the same for a lot of radios, but some radios, they want only .wave files. Some of them, they only want .mp3. Because, for example, if they use a platform like Radio King, or I don't know, they would need some MP3 of good quality. So I would advise that one of the first thing that you should do, but it's the same in every country, is to, if especially in the newsletter you have a link to download the track, you should definitely have kind of a Dropbox, or you can use some other platform to have that, and have the files in MP3 in .wave with the right information, really well written. Because I know that a lot of radio stations in France, they are really like maniac of having the right information in the file, and sometimes they accept to broadcast the file, and if they see that the file is not well like put, if you don't have the name of the artist, if you don't have the info, they're gonna say rubbish. I'm not gonna broadcast this. So it's really important that you have your info really well put, and if you present well, like with the, also if you put like the cover, because sometimes they want to put in the online radio part, like try to have your thing really professional, clean, and radio stations will love that.
Because it sounds like that certain radio stations have a little bit of a OCD or something attached. So
yeah, kind of, probably, because usually what you need to, it's important about the landscape in France is that, as I told you, we don't have a lot of big community radios. It's usually very small teams. So the ones you're going to contact are very small teams. Usually it's like one person who's doing the whole programmation for everything and the marketing and everything. So if you simplify their lives, it's going to be easier. And so I see in the comment that someone is mentioning Disco. It's a nice platform to have all your info gathered at the same place. There are some other ones, one more simple and I think not less expensive, that's called SongSpace. But I know that Disco as well. I don't have like a preference for now because I'm not, I don't know them well. But if you have some time, like this kind of platform that you can use to have all your files at the same place and share them easily, it's probably a good thing to use.
And speaking of Disco, is there certain genres that is performing better than others? Or is it like certain things that are like no go, or is there like, you know, cultural aspect of this? Because, for example, one thing that I've found is like, you know, what is commercial pop, for example, or commercial in that sense in a given country can change or vary a lot from country to country. So in Eastern Europe, it seems like, you know, more aggressive music, whether that's techno and stuff, or drum and bass, or metal and stuff like that is, you know, actually relatively commercial or more popular. and obviously in Latin America or something, maybe it's, you know, reggaeton or stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have something similar in terms of France? Is there certain genres that are more, you know, trending than others?
Yeah, definitely. I will even separate them in 2 or 3 categories. I think what is performing really like the big commercial radios or the big radios or even the big regional ones, so the ones with Yacast, really like pop music, pop or popular music. Like we have like variété française, chanson, what we call chanson or variété française, works really well. But if you come from abroad, it's kind of like pop, electronic pop music. This kind of music work really well on the big radio stations and the regional commercial ones. Then if you go down to like the more I don't know, local ones and small ones, they're gonna try to differentiate, and they don't have the same criteria, and usually they want to be like diggers, music diggers. So what is fun is that sometimes what you see is that if you have a song that has big potential to be on the big radio stations, it can work really bad on the smaller ones and the smaller regional and local ones. And if you have like a very indie psych rock music and you'd say it's never going to be on the big radio stations, and sometimes all the local small ones are going to love it. So it's interesting because with your music, if you're really in like an indie niche, and if you're like in a genre that you know that you only seducing just a part of the people, you should not focus on like ending up on the big radio, but just focus on like getting on the smaller ones, the local ones, and then you can target some more picky ones, especially in the public broadcasting service, like at Radio France. We have one of the radios which is called FIP, which is very eclectic and really broadcasts some tracks that nobody knows about. And you can try to have this kind of person because since they are public broadcasting, they want to be eclectic and stuff. But all the big commercial ones, you're gonna have a type of music, and you need to be able to say my music is for big commercial radios, or my music is for like smaller ones, or is in the niche. Okay. But you have a strategy for both. And for rap and urban music, it's complicated on the radio. Some of them are opening up, especially online radios. But for FM radios, not a lot of them are broadcasting hip hop and rap for now, unfortunately, because it's huge in France, but on the radio, not too much.
Okay, interesting. And what about something like jazz, as Motown Joe also mentions? Because we all know these French cafes or Parisian cafes where, you know, we hear jazz and lounge music and stuff. Is that something that are on radio as well?
Jazz, I think, like jazz or what we would call like African music and world music, you really have some specific radio stations that are specialized in that. And FIP loves that kind of music, for example, the eclectic ones like that. And you also have a lot of like online radios and some smaller FM radios that are specialized. If you do jazz, reggae, if you do African music, I would advise you to try to target and look for specialized radio in these areas, because usually there's not too much new music that is sent to these radios. So they are really looking for new music that they can broadcast. But you should narrow your search to the specialized radios. We have some of them on Groover as well, because I didn't tell, but you have a lot of like FM radios and web online radios that you can contact on Groover. It's more than 50 now, and we have some of them that are especially specialized in jazz and soul music. For example, we have Art District Radio, one of the big ones in the public French public broadcasting system is RFI, which is good for more African music, for example, because it's broadcast in a lot of African countries. We have one which is called Radio Creamy, which is a lot of like Afrobeat, funk, this kind of stuff. You should really look for these kind of radio stations, even if you don't get a lot of them. They have a good image for your music that you can then communicate on.
I can, by the way, recommend a service I've tested. I don't know if you tried it as well, but it's something called Radio Garden. And it's like a virtual, like a radio.garden. So it's like a 3D globe, like if you would imagine Google Maps or something. Nice. And then you can just go to specific countries and find radio stations and listen to them directly. So you can, you know, go to Paris and then it will show you like a ton of radio stations, and you can go to these specific ones. So that way you can, you know, listen very quickly to different kinds of radio stations, and at the same time see if there is a match potential. But it's actually quite cool, and then you see the name of the radio stations immediately. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Radio Creamy. I told about that because they're really cool guys. They love the music, and they are on Groover. So if you want to contact them for the first time, you can definitely use Groover for it. And they're really cool. And someone says how to send a song to FIP. So actually, you can contact them directly. Some of them answer. You can get the emails of the programmers if you dig a bit. Don't know exactly how, but you can probably find them. But another way is not direct, but on Groover, we have an official partnership with FIP. And every month, we send them 10 to 15 tracks that are in the editorial line that had great browsers on the platform. So it's really to have this idea of you start small, you start with small radios, and then you get some small radio and small media outlets, and then you get some coverage, and then you're able to communicate to bigger ones, and then go further to the bigger radios. So we're trying to like stamp of approval. And
it's so interesting, this because like when we had this conversation. When we had this conversation last week with Andreas and Oliver from Germany, it was like, if you do not use MPN, this music promotion network in Germany, which is collectively owned by the radio stations, you cannot, like, more or less, you cannot get your music on the radio. So there was like one curation platform for the music on radios, and it seems that France is completely opposite. Like, it seems that, you know, with a good story, with personalization, with a little digging, a little, you know, groundwork, you can actually, you know, get airplays there. And I mean, and if you are an indie artist and you're stuck with Corona or whatever, then you know, you should have a lot of time to actually, you know, try and do this.
I have a little story about this. Is that so? The first thing is you're completely right, because I saw that, for example, in Canada they have something called Poste d'écoute. I know that in Germany you have these services that you can use that are going to send you music to all the radio stations, and all the radios are going there to get some music. I think the difference in France is dual. Is that you have the first thing is that there's Yacast, and Yacast is very expensive. And they are also making the radios pay on their side. So they're making the artists pay on one side and the radios pay on the other side. So the only radios on Yacast are the big commercial regional ones and the big ones. So all the local ones, they are not going to pay to get Yacast. They don't have the money for it. So there's still a very artisanal kind of craft thing. Most of them, I think, they go on SoundCloud and listen to music. And in over this kind of like digging music and having people sending them some music, they listen a lot to what the PR agents send them. And actually, what's fun, when I told you there was a night I went on all the websites to get the email addresses of everybody, because I wanted to send them a newsletter. There was one radio which didn't have an email address. It only had like a form. And I was like, oh, I don't have time. I was like, okay, I'm going to say just like the music to them with this form. Just the only radio out of 250 I sent the music to. And actually they answered me the next day saying, it's great music, we're going to program it and we're going to put it in rotation. So you can definitely, if you find some cool, nice, small radios and you have time, send them music. It's going to get on air. It can get on air on some of them at least. And then you can see it on Warm, and it's fun. And yeah.
This is so cool. And yeah, and speaking of Warm, actually, I just checked before we started, and you mentioned that that there is probably what did you say, 11 or 1,200 radios in France, and I just saw that Warm is monitoring 800.
It's great, because you're gonna know if it gets on the radio there. Yeah,
there's a very high chance, high likeliness at least.
Yeah, I think I saw that I think it's 1200 FM radios. So I know that you
Mm,
also have some online radios in that, but I
mm,
think you're monitoring all the important ones, because even this one, it was a Radio Marseillette. It's like a very small one, like broadcasting in a very small region. And I got the plays on Warm, so Warm is a really good service to know where your music is played, and also because sometimes radio are gonna broadcast your music, and you don't know that they're broadcasting your music. Actually, with Warm, you get to know it, and then if you have new releases or if you have another artist, you can definitely use that as a gateway to contact them and have them broadcast your music again, your new music especially. And yeah, there's the email addresses. Can you get them
yeah,
from a central database?
yeah. I actually just replied. Apparently, I did that twice. I don't know how, but I did. Because as far as I understand, this is very much in violation with GDPR. That you cannot share email addresses or personal email addresses to, for example, curators or editors. Something like you can do like info emails or some radios that are not personalized, but not with personalized email addresses. You cannot share that.
What you can do if you have time is go say like radio stations in France. One other thing that I would advise you, if you want to get more precise, is to put name of cities. For example, radio stations in Lyon or radio stations in Paris.
Yeah.
And then you're gonna get some databases. You don't have forcibly the email address, but you have the website. And if you go on the website and then in the contact section, usually there's the email address, like for most the local radios. So not a lot of the Les Indes Radio one, which are also the same as the Yakas ones. Not so much for the big radios, but for all the local and regional radios, you have them. And just to remind you, there's like these 20 radio stations that are big. Then they're like between 40 to 100 maximum that are
Medium.
big and on the Les Indes Radio and Yacast. But then you have 1,000 that you can contact that are not in this kind of network. So
Yeah, I think that's so cool. I mean, it gives so much diversity basically, because they all work independently and they don't have a huge group of people who needs to decide, or one particular person that decides everything. Or if so, then maybe that's because he's the only person working there, and then it
exactly.
makes sense. So it seems that it is very different from other countries, and it also seems that you don't have the need to use like a professional radio promoter. It
No.
seems like you can do quite a lot. But speaking of radio promoters, do you have any idea like how much does it cost to hire a radio promoter in France, and how is the process?
Yeah, so to insist on the point you said, I think, yeah, when you start, don't hire a radio promoter at first, because if you're like, it's your first EP or your first songs, it's going to be some wasted money. But if you're starting to have like a big buzz or something like this, especially in the country, it would make sense to take a radio promoter at that stage, at a stage where you have a serious project and it makes sense. And you can get, because the radio promoter, it's going to be successful. It's going to be interesting for you only if they help you get into the big regional and the big radio stations. Because for the local ones, you can do it by yourself or with services. You can use Groover to contact some of them and stuff like that. But the radio promoter, if you get one, I know that the price is at least it's minimum 1,500, I would say, and it would go like to,
depending on which one. And
yeah, if you get the best one, it's going to be very expensive. You're going to get some results, but I know that there's one. I don't remember his name, and he's like really like secret and stuff like that. But there's one guy who knows everybody and can make you. But he needs to like your project to support you. Yeah, I'm bringing a lot of like shadiness in this.
Like
This guy, I know he can make you pay. He has like very high rates, but he actually brings some great vessels.
and it's like you cannot find him; he will find you.
Yeah, something like this. Probably.
Also, it would be interesting just to touch a base a little bit on streaming. I know this is basically about a radio, but But how important is streaming compared to radio? And I know obviously that Deezer is a French company, so is that still like a serious competitor to Spotify, or have Spotify taken over? And like and how is streaming in general compared to radio? Because obviously they're different, but how do you see that?
First, to do the transition on the relationship between streaming and radio, I think what is interesting is that we see in studies that radio is still one of the biggest way of discovering new music. So lots of people discover music through radio, and then they go on streaming platforms. So if you hear people saying like radios or media outlets or everything of this is dead, it's not. Maybe it's not the place where the music is the most consumed and listened to, but actually it's the place where people discover music first, and then they go consume it on streaming platforms. And of course they discover music also on streaming platforms, but a lot on radio. So this is what the relationship would be. Then for streaming platforms, it's really interesting. I think in France, it's a split between subscribers between Spotify and Deezer.
Okay.
No, Deezer is really big in France, so it's interesting. It's an interesting platform. The problem is, and I was talking to it with someone who's specialized in Spotify in playlists. He was telling me there's no actual way of influencing really well the playlist, get into playlist for Apple Music or Deezer. The only strategy you could have for playlist is for Spotify. Because it's the place where you can have.
That's difficult not enough in itself. I mean, you can maybe find a person that has a playlist with 200 listeners or whatever, but to find, like, you can never get to Rap Caviar, you can never get to Mint, you can never get these unless you have serious connections in-house.
Exactly, and but I think there's still some things you can do definitely on streaming platforms, and it's an area in which you can definitely evolve, because not too many artists and not too many professionals are spending time on trying to understand how it works. And actually, there's about the three kinds of playlists that you have on Spotify. There are the user-generated ones, so the ones that you can do, or people can do, third-party people can create, and that can sometimes have a lot of subscribers. I think that Rap Caviar, it started as a third party, and then Spotify got it and it became an official one. Then there are the editorial and official ones by Spotify, who are people at Spotify who do it, who are kind of like the thing that everybody wants to get, but not too many people get it. And there's the third thing, which is the algorithmic ones. And the two strategy you should have is regarding the user-generated ones, the third-party ones, the independent ones, on which you can use kind of the similar technique that I was telling you. You can go on your profile, go and use similar artists, see which are the similar artists that you have. And in these ones, if you go in the About section on Spotify of these people, you usually have the 5 biggest playlists in which they got. If it's a Tame Impala, you only get some like editorial Spotify ones, so you cannot contact them. But if you go to a smaller ones, usually you're going to have a lot of user-generated playlists that you don't know about, but actually bring a lot of streams. And these guys do a little digging on the internet or on Facebook. You can find their contact address. So you can spend a bit of time on all your similar artists to you, to your artists, and the similar artists to the similar artists to you. And you can get kind of like a list of interesting user-generated playlists that you can get in. It could be a great strategy. Also, because if you get in a lot of these user-generated playlists, you're going to influence the algorithmic one. So Discovery Radar, weekly discoveries, the On Loop, this kind of like playlist that Spotify generates. If they see that you are being added to a lot of user-generated playlists, you're going to get into these more algorithmic one every release you do. So it's a strategy that could be interesting, but is very similar to what you can do with radio stations. It's actually trying to find the contact of the playlisters and contact them. But apparently, if you do it like persistently, it could have some results. It could work.
Yeah, and speaking of, you just mentioned loop, and I cannot help but say that, like, if you spend time, for example, and getting your music onto, certain niche radio stations, it is very relevant that certain people will use Shazam then to actually detect what kind of song it was, because they don't know what it is, because it's not, the biggest, pop hits. It is something, they don't necessarily know, and if they are like, let's say it's alternative radio or punk rock or whatever it is, then people, probably connect a lot to that particular genre. So then they would probably be interested in discovering what it is. Then they would Shazam it, and then probably it end up on, or could end up on their playlist on whatever streaming services. And then we're kind of back to the same loop again. So
yeah, and there's something to support that, is that when you get into some bigger radios, usually you can have your Shazam analytics on Apple Music for artists. And you can see that when you get on big radio stations, or like even once, you have like some big spikes in the number of Shazam. So, and Shazam is really like people liking the music and wanting to know what it is, and then they're going to consume it online. So it's really interesting for that to say that radio is still like a big way of getting known on this, getting your music heard. So these are both strategies that are interesting, and I think every artist should definitely try to get this kind of influencers, these people who have an influence even on a small niche. And Groover is a great way to start contacting some, because you have a lot of contacts available. You can target with filters to see which ones could fit your music. It's low it's a low amount of money, because it's €2 per contact, and the average campaign it's between 40 to 50 euros. So it's really something that you might have to promote your music, and you can actually get some cool results out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's a very affordable way to test out something in, especially with France, and see if it makes sense to focus more here. I mean, I think that's also actually something that are super relevant, that it seems like a big part of the music industry says that if you're a French artist or whatever, then you have to do well in your own country before you can go anywhere else. But if you're an Icelandic alternative rock band, and you can actually find something, influencers or radio stations that fits this kind of niche, I don't think that they would, say like, oh, we're not going to play this because it's like far away, it's from Iceland. I mean, who gives a shit? I mean, the point is,
I totally agree. If they're gonna like the music, they're gonna broadcast it wherever it come from. And actually, what is fun is when you talk about small markets. For example, Belgium is a small market because they don't have a big population, and so artists there, when they kind of get known a bit, they immediately think about how am I going to go to France, especially if they speak French, or to other countries, because they need to expand their market. And actually, Groover is used by a lot of indie record labels, a lot of also bigger record labels, who use it as a way to try out and test artists on specific markets, and especially in France, because most of the influencers we have, I think it's between 75 to 80%, are still French. We're quite strong in Quebec as well, also a bit in Belgium. Now it's starting to getting bigger in Italy, but especially for France, it's the way to try your music in France today. If you want to try it easily and to see, can my music work on the French market for a small amount of money, Groover is great. And what I would like to say about this, about radio stations and these user-generated playlists and the media outlets that you can contact, sometimes you're going to think they are small, they have a small audience. I'm not going to get listened by a lot of people, and I'm going to spend a lot of time contacting them and spending time with them. But actually, they don't have a big audience. So what is it for? There are very much two goals with this. The first one is this: they still have an audience, even if it's a niche audience, even if it's like one person that listens to your music and gets a fan of you and going to buy one of your vinyl. It makes sense. But the other thing that is really important is that what you get, like the radio airplays that you get, the media, the blogs, the articles that you get, are things that you can communicate on. You can build like a press file with this.
Yeah, that's a result, right?
It's really important because as I said, in France, it's really important to say start at the bottom and rise. If you get played on like 50 radio stations, even very small ones and local ones, and then you contact a bigger one and say, my song is being played on 50 radio stations, these ones, you're gonna get like more legitimate to get on this radio, and the programmer is gonna say, oh, it's great. This song is getting played on a lot of radio stations, because their goal of the radios is to have music that the audience is gonna like. It's really like it's especially for radio stations. So if they see that you played on lots of radios, even small ones, if you have articles, reviews, it shows how serious your project is and how your music has potential to please people. So yes, don't hesitate to do it, even for small ones, and communicate around it. If you have like a lot of radio stations adding you see them on War, do like a Facebook post, an Instagram post saying thank you to all these radio stations who feature us. It's a cool way of like showing how your project is rising, and it's one of the cool things that is important in these promotion strategies.
Yeah, so I mean, we already spoke over an hour, so we have to kind of, but we could continue forever. But there's a couple of things that I would like to touch base on before we jump off. But what are perhaps some of the, like, could we summarize the key takeaways in terms of working with radio in France? I mean, I guess one of the things was that, if you are a French-speaking artist, whether you're from France or another country, and speaking French, that helps a lot due to the high volume of French-speaking music. But if you and then I guess being personal in terms of finding radio station, communicating with them, and not being afraid of targeting something that is potentially too small, because again, like, I think some people say like, well, that's a small radio station because it's, let's say, for example, only online. But in theory, if a radio station is online, it means that it can be accessed anywhere in the world. So, and what is a small audience?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not 10 people or 10,000 people. I mean, that's super relevant and individual. So,
especially, I think the idea today is not to say, because I see artists that say, I want to be on Skyrock, or it's like one of the bigger rap or hip hop radios, and they're like, it's like, what another way of doing it is not getting on one radio station. Even if you get on Skyrock, it's not going to be sufficient. Your way of doing it is like hustling and get on multiple places. The more places you can get on, the more radio stations, the more media outlets, even very small, the more small playlists that are going to get like you 2 or 3 listeners. Have like a volume approach on this to try to get the most out of it and the biggest number, because it's going to speak for your music. It's going to show that lots of people support your music, but it's also going to get you actually an audience at last. And to summarize, I just noted them to be sure. One of the things is the language, of course. Like people in radios in France, they're gonna favor French music in French, but it doesn't mean they're not gonna broadcast music in English. And you can definitely try to contact them, and it can work. Definitely, you can look at the area of the kind of music that they broadcast, and it's a way you can do it. But it's complicated in France because of that. The second thing that is better than in some other countries is that you can contact small radio stations, and some of them are going to answer you, and they can broadcast you. It takes time. You need to contact them. You can find their email address on their website, but you can do it, and you can get on radio stations in France that way.
And establish relationships, actually.
And build relationships. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And have this one thing. Maybe try with a volume thing, like a newsletter or the similar, or the way of or use Warm to target the ones that you're gonna spend time on. But it's gonna work. And for this, you don't need a PR, or you don't need to pay a big mission, because it's not worth it for that, and it's gonna be too much money, and it's not gonna be successful for it. But you can use Groover, or you can use your time to contact them directly. And the third thing is to look at similar artists, even on Spotify, and use Warm maybe to find some radio stations around. It's a good way to see on which radio stations your music has the potential of being played. So
I think that I mean, that I hope people take notes, because this is great information. I've learned a lot today about the French radio market. I just want to touch off round off with about Groover. So what are the future going to look like for Groover, and what kind of countries are you expecting to go into and target, and like how does the future look in 2 years?
So, good question. So we have artists and artist representatives using it to send their music from all over the world. But for now, we had a lot of effort on building a community of tastemakers, radio stations, and media outlets in France. We starting to be mature on this, and it's starting to be self nurtured by people who sign up by themselves. So which is great. We're trying to do the same in a few countries right now. Quebec, with a lot of effort. So the French part of Canada. Also Belgium, Italy. We starting things in the UK, and we want to try to expand in Germany, because we have a lot of people using Groover there, and they expect to see some German tastemakers on the platform. So we're trying to expand in these countries for now. Not touching too much to the US for now, because we already have people using it, and the US is so big. We would have more like a local approach of like maybe going to one city or something like this. So this is the way we see the expansion, like the 6 months to 1 year coming. We see the platform, like we have a lot of updates on the platform, and one of the big things we're focusing on is help you more target the right persons to contact on Groover, because there are 500 contacts now, so it's complicated to find who to contact for your music. So guide you better in choosing the right ones for you is one of our priorities. Then the second thing, so I said about it, but expand the community of influencers in a few countries. So I talked about Germany, Germany. I would like to Germany, John, a lot. Belgium, Canada, the UK, and Italy. And then the third step is, thanks to all the feedback that is made on the platform, by analyzing it, we see that there are some of the artists that really have a lot of potential, and we want to see how we can bring them a step further. So present them to bigger radio stations that we don't have on a Groover itself yet, to bigger record labels, and see how we could be really an accelerator of the career of these artists that use Groover. So to sum it up, our vision is simple. It's like help artists get their music heard, and then the second step that we're starting right now is to then accelerate their career and help them accelerate their career and get to success, hopefully.
That is so cool, Dorian. So it's like almost like an accelerator program.
Yeah, we'd like to. We're working on something like this. I hope we would be able to like put it out of the water soon. But for now, we're focusing a lot on the platform because of this coronavirus and COVID thing. We've had a lot of artists that went to the digital promotion because they cannot play live. And definitely we have a lot of work like just to serve these artists. And yes, John, you can definitely contact me. I can send you maybe an email address, but I don't know how to comment on this.
Oh, hang on, I got it. I can share it for you.
Yeah, you can put my email address. No worries at all. Yeah, definitely. You can. Don't hesitate to. You can put my email address. No worries in the comment section. They can send me email.
And you're not gonna feel violated by GDPR then.
No, it's okay. I give you the right to share my email address. Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram as well. I just went a bit on Instagram. It's kind of a cool way. I usually share some cool music that we have on Groover on my profile, and I do kind of webinars and stuff. So no, it's cool. Nice.
Great stuff. This is the longest warm talk we have had so far. So,
but I'm really talkative, I think.
I'm really happy that we have this conversation, Dorian. I learned a lot, and I'm so happy to hear that that the French market is slightly different than other markets, because it can be super difficult to get radio airplays to begin with. So it's nice to hear that some places are easier than others.
Yeah, and I need to learn a lot about how to actually get onto radios in other countries, which I know nothing of. So I'm gonna definitely watch like the other warm lives.
Do that.
Some insight. So
And we're gonna continue the next couple of months as well. So
nice.
So hopefully there'll be more.
Nice, thank you. Yeah, it's been really great. So, and I'm gonna have a look at your radio garden thing also. I think it's great. Yeah,
it is so cool, especially like going to India, or I mean like Nigeria or something, like just going to a completely different place than you're used to, and find like a local radio station. But I really like it. It's super cool. I think some of my colleagues hates it because I only play rather strange music. So
no, it's cool. It's cool. It's good to have like a specific point of view of things, and it's what we told about. Like when you have a specific kind of music, you should definitely focus on like the kind of radio stations and people who are gonna like this kind of music, and you can definitely build some great relationships. So it's cool.
I'm gonna play
that. Thank you, Jesper, for this time. It was great.
Thank you so much. Good to chat, Dorian. Take care, my friend.
Take care. See you. Bye.